Willis College is Canada's oldest private career college. We actually were founded 2 years before Confederation. We do have online learning. As you'll see in my presentation, we had a little bit of it. Now we got a lot of it. And part of our challenge was to get up to speed. Always at Willis, our #1 focus and concern are our students and their success. So therefore, we had to come to grips quickly with the situation and find a way that we can continue on the education. Our student range from 18 to 58, right? It's a career college, so quite often we get people who are retooling. Part of my conversation here will be a discussion of retooling careers, because given our COVID-19 situation, many jobs are no longer practical and other types of jobs are now in greater demand. When I looked at the overall spectrum of this conversation, I broke it up into 4 chunks. How online learning was before this all happened to us. There's a little bit of a history walk down memory lane. Before computer online learning, there was various types of distance learning, and I'll talk about those. Online learning during COVID, so quickly adapting. What happened to all of us right in the middle of it? Some institutions were like, well, hey, we're already doing online learning. Here you go. Other ones were like, what? And had to basically suspend their business because they didn't have the capabilities. Willis was really fortunate because AR instructors across all spectrums are top notch. Willis is very agile. We've always switched horses quickly as appropriate. We do have a technical program, so the boss dipped deep into the geek well and pulled a lot of our techies out to make this happen. Online learning post COVID-19, right? So I was going to put a picture of a crystal ball here, but I opted not to. What will this new normal that everybody talks about, what is it going to be? So again, this is speculation. I did a lot of research for this. If somebody's really curious, I can share all my citations for this information. Some of the ideas are mine, a lot of it are from experts, right? And then Willis College, yes, we survived. What were some of our lessons learned as we went through this? And just to point out, every single person at Willis was on deck to make this happen. So I said, the IT guys built the system, sure, but management, Ranjith, right? Students had to embrace it. Instructors had to get trained. All levels were full hands-on to make this happen. So that being said, let me start the show. So before, right? Again, the history of distance learning. So before it all became computers and stuff, there was other methods of doing it. After I discuss the content here, yes, there'll be data showing up as I push buttons. There'll be subtopics of market size and growth, challenges, Canadian stats, and some American stats. As I mentioned before, actually before we started recording, the front end of this presentation is a little bit heavy. It will speed up as we move along. So before we had all this computer-based stuff, there was print-based, right? So correspondence courses. I'm sure some of us, maybe some of us are old enough to recall that concept, right? Radio-based instruction, right? And TV-based instruction. I remember watching TVO in Ontario to learn some information on some topics, right? Here's some dates. So apparently the earliest print-based attempt was advertised in 1728. Boston Gazette. Apparently it was somebody who was trying to teach shorthand. So I guess shorthand was the Twitter of the day. Basically was mailed through lessons. So the first one, the person was soliciting, right? Coincidentally, I mentioned Willis College has been around since 1865. Shorthand was actually one of the offerings of Willis College when it was founded by Stephen Willis back then. The print-based one, right, finally hit the road and became something in 1840s. Again, a shorthand course. Sir Isaac Pitman mailed out postcards in shorthand. I guess the students would have to translate and decode it and send back the results, right? And that'd be an indication of them actually understanding the process. This was kind of key because it was the first concept of sending out information and getting feedback from your students by having them mail it to you. And again, which is what we do now in online learning, present information and get feedback. The first official one, print-based, University of London, 1858. So you can actually get a degree. via correspondence. Around 1938, right, radio hit the waves, and this is again some US statistics, but hundreds of public schools, colleges, and universities started broadcasting educational information. This was mostly a one-way type process, right? So educating, but not actually getting feedback. PBS down in the States in the 70s started television-based learning. Again, I mentioned TVO, that was near and dear to my heart. And then a cool stat, right? 1980s, computers start hitting, various systems. Internet shows up later. First completely online course for credit was from the U of T in 1984. So go Canada. And I wish Rima, our boss, one of our bosses was here, because the course was Women in Computers in Education, right? So nothing's changed, right? Women in Technology is a big move that Willis College is supporting as well. So there's where we were, right? So there was distance learning before these computer things got involved. Before COVID hit, right? The increase in online education and the technologies, right, was always there. Investments were going. Again, here's some predictions. Again, a lot of these numbers were, this is what we prognosticate, right? And then all of a sudden, COVID hit. So I suggest to you that there's going to be two competing forces here. One, the online drive for more things to become online because of social distancing. But at the second time, the fact that we can't attend universities and colleges, students may actually be pulling back and wondering how they should proceed. I suggest we actually will end up plus instead of a minus from this. But here's some of the stats. Projected again, pre-COVID, $350 billion by 2025. This little graphic gets big later on when I zoom in, so the mystery will be solved. This graphic up here is actually from Udemy. So they did a study to see exactly what people were going online to learn during COVID-19, right? And so they gathered some metrics and they found out what increases in various geographic areas and the type of things that people were watching. And they found people were going online to upskill, right? So learn new tools and tricks, stay busy. What am I going to do? Do you need to be more productive, right? And then as remote working kicked in, they had to learn how to use the technologies. So here's some of the increases that happened shortly after COVID. 425% increase in enrollment on Udemy, 55% more content creation by instructors, right? Supply and demand, there's a demand for it, make a supply. And then businesses and governments jumped in, right? And here's a graphic. And I found it kind of interesting here if you look at some of the numbers, right? So apparently in Canada, we decided we could try to make money off the stocks. Mindfulness, I had to look up what the heck mindfulness learning was. And apparently that's learning to be more aware of your surroundings and embrace things, right? I don't know if that's because of our marijuana laws, that suddenly that became a thing. I'm just kidding. And deep learning is actually scary. It's an AI thing. So I guess Canada decided we wanted to start Skynet or something. So that's what we were doing. The Americans, I guess, busted out their electronic coloring book, Adobe Illustrator, photography, graphic design. Looks like the Mediterranean decided to start a band. Looks like Italy and guitar, Spain piano, right? Mexico speed reading. Just catch up on all those books. Now I got a lot of time. Let's bust through them really fast. And interesting how the UK and Australia seem to have almost the exact same list here. Characters, keyboards, guitar, music theory, right? So anyway, this is what Udemy saw within the first 3 weeks of COVID-19. So boom, everybody's online. So challenges, did I skip one? Don't mind me here. No, we were good, sorry. Happens sometimes. So this is a Prezi presentation, so that's why it's dancing around as opposed to a PowerPoint slide. I like the dynamics, but sometimes I get lost. So challenges of online learning, right? We've all been through this. Students without computers. Yeah, good news about a lot of online platforms is that they will work on mobile devices. So if a student doesn't have a computer, they may have a smartphone. Doesn't everybody have a smartphone? Later on, there's a stat from American Information that actually says a certain percentage of students do all their homework on their phone. Okay, I could never do that. If I don't have a mouse, it's like putting oven mitts on me and asking me to play the piano. It's like, I need a mouse, right? Internet availability and speed, right? So we've all seen this one, right? Everybody jumps online, all of a sudden, all those nice big bandwidth pipes, everybody's on there. It's definitely shown the areas that are poorly serviced. I saw an article where Mississippi Mills thought they had decent internet, and they all tried to jump online, and everything just kind of ground to a halt. So this busting of the digital divide, getting high speed out to everybody, is no longer a nice thing to do. It's going to be an essential thing to do. Technical issues. You know, it's one thing to show up at school and your computer doesn't work. Oh, just so you know, I'm also the IT guy at the Empire College. So when things break, I have to run and fix it. Big difference when you're nowhere near the IT guy. You have to handle your own tech. And even if you get your computer working, you get a little teeny tiny monitor, right? I like lots of monitors when I do things. If you're doing online learning, a couple of monitors. So technical issues with that. Self-motivation. Luckily, my alarm still goes off at 6:30 and I still get up for work at 6:30. It's been 3 months. I still haven't realized that I can actually sleep in, but getting yourself motivated, you know, to get dressed. All this commercials on TV about sweatpants CEOs and things like that. So keeping motivated. Managing your time. You know, it's almost 40 degrees. I'm near a lake. I could be in a lake right now instead of being a productive citizen. Managing time. Fear of technology. I ran into many students at Willis College, not in the technical course. If they're afraid of computers, then they would not come in the room, who do not like embracing technology, and now their entire world educationally is done that way. Adapting from face-to-face to virtual classroom, right? That's a challenge. Kind of tough to do chemistry experiments, right? When the high school kids are at home, you don't want junior going underneath the kitchen sink and grabbing the bleach, right? And then computer literacy. So can they set up the computer? Check. Do they know how to operate Windows? Check. How about the programs? Do they know how to Google search, right? It's a lot more than just turning a computer on to get this all working. Busy schedules, the kids are home, right? So how do you feed in time for your own activities when you got everything else to do? Online learning, a lot of people kind of feel like they're hanging on a thread by themselves. It's like, I have no support. One of the key things we did at Willis when we built ours was to make sure we already had a support infrastructure. Again, we were lucky. We have almost a dozen IT instructors. We all became the help desk. And for the first, and still going on now, we'll see emails and we're solving problems. But without that, our first week of launching the program wouldn't have succeeded. When you're doing something online, it seems kind of pretend. So what does it mean in real life? So grasping the real world implications of online learning could be a challenge. Being locked up, right? Being socially distanced, right? Now you're trying to work on stuff, but you're kind of getting, you know, anxious and depressed. Being a geek is an advantage in this time of social isolation. I've heard several teachers said, hey, I've been practicing this for 30 years, right? So I'm not really impacted by this at all. Some people are. And then you get through all these other challenges, you get to the online learning system, and it's terrible, right? So poorly designed and lack of content. So all these things are hurdles that could keep online learning from being successful. So the Canadian Digital Learning Research Association. So if you go to their website, there's impending data coming up for their latest report, but this is the only one they've released. This is all public institution based. Again, Willis College is private, so we don't quite fall into these stats, but it's still interesting. So they surveyed all the public institutions they could get, right? And they got like an 80% response rate, which means they had a 92% coverage of students. So that means their data set is useful for analytics. More than 2/3 of colleges and universities in public have some kind of online courses for credit, right? Almost all universities and almost everything outside of Quebec. 1.3 million online course registrations, accounting for 8% of all registrations. 1 in 5 students is taking at least one online course for credit. 74% expect this to increase in 2019. Again, this was pre-COVID-19 consideration. I'm sure those numbers have gone beyond that now. All these institutions have some kind of a learning management system, right? And 2/3 complement that with streaming video or live video lectures. So that's what, in fact, we did at Willis. We have an LMS built on Moodle, and we are, in fact, using Zoom to provide online instruction. 50% use open textbooks. Well, what do you mean? You know, they're not closed, you can actually read them? No, it's like open source, not copyrighted. So they've moved away from, you got to buy it from here, from so-and-so, to let's just grab the Planet Brain and see what they've got. So a lot of them moving towards, and a lot of these open textbooks are like living documents, right? As people, you can think about Wikipedia and that kind of stuff. Okay. 2/3 online learning, very important or extremely important. Yeah, guess what? More so now with COVID. 1/3, we're developing an e-learning plan. Yikes, all right? So that means when all this hit, 2/3 did not have any kind of plan, right, as to how to move forward with this. The benefit was increased student access, right? And that is true. The fact that we can't go to the classroom with our students, and I actually do miss it, right, is a negative. But the fact that we're building this online environment means that we are providing. And then when the day comes that we can actually do both at the same time, we have a larger offering. And now, instead of people having to drive to Arnprior or Ottawa, if we have remote online learning, we could be teaching cybersecurity to people in the middle of nowhere, right? They can stay in Braeside, for that matter. And the main barriers were basically instructors, you know, having adequate training, and it takes a lot more work. And it does take a lot more work, especially when you're setting it up for the first time. You have to build all that content. Okay. Blended learning. So blended learning is that combo. Classroom learning, online learning, maybe some labs, send some homework. There's an article I read from Scotland where they fully jumped into that, and they're charging ahead with great success, right? And they're thinking this online and blended is superior to face-to-face, right? Okay. And you can come back to this later, but that's all those metrics from the digital research people expressed in graph. Excuse me. Okay. American statistics. Okay. And it's on the internet. It must be true. That should be a quote that Trump actually said there. Well, online learning is wonderful. It's not the same thing as being in a classroom. That's true. The takeaway for the American stats, basically bigger numbers, right? And why do we care? Well, we live next to the elephant, right? That's where our business goes. So 2017, almost 20 million students were enrolled at degree granting post-secondary institutions. 6.6 million had some kind of online learning component of it. Public institutions used distance learning online way more than private, according to the stats. Most of these distance people are undergraduates. I guess that kind of makes sense because when you're a graduate, you tend to be under the wing of a professor. It's kind of tricky to do that remotely. Some more stats. 3 million students enrolled, at least one, right? 1.6 were exclusively online. And private nonprofit, the numbers are smaller, right? 1.1 million. 47%, right? We're doing that because they're having a hard time getting to class. There's difficulties. So, hey, let's do that online. 21% did it that way because it was the only way of getting that degree. So I don't know if it, you know, maybe it's related to the traveling, or it basically says, yeah, this is not offered anywhere near me. If I want to do this, it's either move to France, right, or do it online. Budget-wise, right, 40% of four-year schools increase their budget. 41% of two-year schools increase theirs. And there you go, 87% of students use their mobile devices, okay? If by mobile device they include laptops, okay, I can handle that. If by mobile device these students are using their smartphones, well, they are better people than I, because as I cannot do that. All right, so that was the before. So what happened when this all came, right? So the current state of affairs we find ourselves in, right? So 1.5 billion children, right, across the world, right, affected in some way, right? School closures, out of school, right? Um, we all heard of Sweden's approach to the coronavirus, where it wasn't exactly just let her rip. It was sort of halfway between let her rip and let's be cautious, but they let their younger school children go, right, with some social distancing, but they kept all the post-secondary students at home, all the older students, right? But anyway, there's some of the numbers. We have 2.12 million post-secondary students here in Canada and 16.6 down in the States. One of the things that happened when all this occurred is that those institutions and companies that have some kind of online offerings, many of them made their services free. So Zoom, for example, kind of busted through their barrier of you can only have 4 people at a time, and they said 100, and then they said, okay, whatever, they let it go. Microsoft has been very gracious. They've opened up their library of material for us. At Willis, we tend to deliver real printed books because students tend to like that. Kind of hard to coordinate book drops with Amazon and that kind of stuff. So having electronic copies was a real boon. McGraw-Hill, Wiley, Pearson, again, all companies that we had relationships with, and they were very gracious, up until the point of actually opening up their online learning environments so the students could use the tools online. So we're all in this together. Some institutions were well positioned, so they already had a fairly well scoped out online learning environment, right? Other ones, not so much. The public schools in Ontario, right, use Google Suite, Google Tools for Education in various forms. It was interesting when I found out it was actually a school board by school board decision. The Ontario Ministry does have a book, and I wish I could find it again. I found it when I was researching, of guidelines on how to use these tools, but they allow the individual school boards to decide what chunks they use, right? Google for Education's been around, right, since 2006. And I think I saw an article on the CBC, probably only like 4 years old or something, was a big thing about, wow, there's this big push, and now all these end user agreements and things parents have to sign to say, guess what? Billy's going to be using this Google Suite starting this term. Please sign here, acceptable use policies. I queried a grade 12 Ontario high school student to find out what his online education experience was like. And this is a direct quote. We get video lessons and assigned questions. My routine is watching said videos and doing the questions. We use Google Classroom and Google Meet. We can't do tests online, so we have assignments for marks. I spend like 6 hours a week doing work, but they're supposed to assign me 3 hours a week per class. And I think this student has, how many classes does my son have? Yeah. So anyway, he is making progress moving forward, right? There's challenges, right? There are mechanisms. He is still doing very well. And some smaller institutions just didn't have a plan, didn't have the capabilities, didn't have the resources. Again, Willis was really lucky to have a great big container of technical people to make this happen. Imagine if you are a private school that specializes in non-technical courses, right? Cooking, hairdressing, that kind of stuff. What do? Sure, I guess you could pay for it, right? Decisions had to be made. So, some institutions were suspended and employees furloughed, et cetera, until the various provincial governments kicked back in and say, hey, we're going to do some wage subsidies, right? So as I said, we were able to quickly adapt, right? And we did manage to get a fully functional online learning system in place. So here's some more market information. Speculation as to, again, this is pre-COVID-19 numbers. So 2019, greater than 200 billion. 2026, maybe 375 billion, right? Annual growth rate of 8%, right? Different percentages, whether you're Europe or Latin America. Interesting here, content providers share is 60%. So that implies that the technology that runs this online learning is able to get 40% of the market. So if you are building the online learning systems or the content, right, you've got the lion's share of the market, but there's still a lot of market opportunity for those people that want to build the infrastructure or the systems that support it. So again, some numbers here, right? 18.6 billion in 2019. Again, there's that 350 billion number by 2025 that seems to pop up in a lot of sources, right? Again, anticipated growth rate of 8%. That's going to change, right? So there'll be more online learning. The big question is going to be what's going to happen to everybody's bottom line. Are they going to be better off in this environment? Some people, I mentioned before, right? If you're doing online learning, you can actually support more students and more remote students. Maybe when we come back from the COVID situation, we end up with a hybrid classroom. And instead of students attending school 5 days a week, maybe it's 2 days a week. And now you have physical resources that can actually support 10 times as many people. But we got to get there first. Right? So as I said, these numbers will increase, and it's going to be key for network connectivity, internet speed, right? The availability of courses. A lot of the demand has moved from, I'm going to take your course, to what can you give me? So it's gone from build it and they will come to what do they want and I will build it. So being able to adapt and do that. Again, beating the Willis drum, we've been doing that for decades. What's the newest in technology? Let's retool our technology courses, right? All right, so post-COVID-19. So as I say here, like that's a misnomer. Even we get the vaccine, which keeps it bouncing all over the place, maybe December, maybe next year. Even if we get it, COVID-19 is still around, right? We got to start vaccinating people, social distancing. So it's going to be a while, right? So our daily life, business, education is going to have to adapt to this new normal, right? And what will this new normal be? Well, from online learning, we're going to have to grow a lot of quality blended learning. So get the online content in place, figure out how that dovetails into our existing traditional stuff. As I mentioned before, online learning, classroom activities. Maybe we only need classrooms for those chunks of the course that really need a lab, right? You come into school to do the chemistry experiment. You come into classroom to set up the Cisco routers and switches or the Sophos hardware so you can work with it, right? Now that we find ourselves in this online life, right? Colleges and universities will have to prioritize. It is speculated, the numbers are all over the place. One I seem to see the most is class sizes will be less than half of what they were before, while we're still social distancing. So therefore, if you have half as many people in the classroom, you better have more clients outside of the classroom. So to keep your numbers up and keep functioning, you're gonna have to do that through online. And how you're gonna support this, you're gonna have to build the infrastructure or rent the infrastructure from somebody and train all your staff to handle this new paradigm. And a growth in demand for skill-based training. So now with this switch around, right, we're not going to have as many people in jobs, right? If you have to social distance the meat plant, what an odd topic, Rob, but yes, the meat plant, there's gonna be less people in there. So what are they going to do now, right? So they're going to stop making sausages and you're going to go to cybersecurity perhaps, right? So people will be retooling, and this seems to happen all the time, right? Retraining the workforce. And what do people want? What are the important programs, right? Healthcare has always been important. We've always talked about our aging population. Now we have our aging population and this virus running amok. So now the demand for skilled healthcare professionals has gone through the roof. All our supply chain management, especially in the food system, I had no idea that it was that weak. I saw a picture, I think week 1 of COVID. Somebody took a cell phone shot of the toilet paper aisle and no frills, and I didn't believe it. I'm going, that's a joke, right? And I contacted somebody, said, no, its stuff's all gone. Who knew that toilet paper could disappear so quick, right? And food and other things we've seen where entire crops are being just, driven back into the ground because there's nobody to harvest it. So all these weaknesses were revealed. And now we find ourselves working remotely, using collaborative tools, just like we're doing today. So now training people how to do that effectively is going to be part of online education. And the great digital divide, right? So the pandemic revealed that people and places, right, do not have sufficient internet speed or access to internet or computing equipment, right, to actually function in all this extra online demand. So that will also be addressed. So, are there opportunities in this new normal? Yes, there are. First one I can think of is, I mentioned before that I'm doing all my shopping online, right? I mentioned before that my life is kind of dictated by when Walmart tells me I can pick stuff up, or when No Frills says your bananas are ready, Mr. Wilson. A lot of systems don't have e-commerce. No Frills didn't have curbside delivery when all this started. I think it took them a month and a half to get that in place. So local stores didn't. Renfrew Walmart didn't have it. I was driving to Smith Falls, or Carleton Place or Smith Falls to pick up. Why didn't I go to Canada? Well, less population, right? I was trying to go somewhere the resources were and the disease was not. So all those people came up to speed. SMB, small and medium businesses. There's a great business opportunity to go to somebody who has a website and say, let me e-commerce that for you, or do your own company, right? And that being said, there's web design, sales, how the financial transaction is going to happen, how am I going to manage my inventory? So all that is in place. Online learning platform development, yep. You can build the infrastructure. So you're not the educator, but you're a techie geek. So you build the servers, get this remote service in place, right? Various people come, they rent your service. So you build the infrastructure. Or you are an educator, right, with some skills in one of the learning management systems, Moodle or Canvas or something like that. So you take people's existing content and you provide the service of making it online for them. Remote day-to-day business operation and management. So you can either, as a business, start teaching people how to use the existing tools, right? Best practices for Zoom. Did you know there was a tool that did that? Here's a ticketing system. Or maybe you create new technology, right, to address this need. Yeah, many businesses are wondering if they even need office buildings. I think it was a few days ago I saw that Twitter has basically fully committed to a work from home model from this point on for the rest of their lives. Goodbye Twitter buildings, if you even had those, right? I have people friends that work at various tech companies in Ottawa. They are making more money and being more efficient now than when they were actually working in the office. And they're having conversations as to, are we actually even going to go back to the office? Are we going to just use one of those rented as you needed spaces like they used to have down on O'Connor Street? So standard brick and mortar seems to be changing everywhere. I didn't include it in this presentation, but I saw a presentation from a marketing professor in the States, and he was suggesting that universities and colleges that aren't really large and can survive this are going to end up being impacted just like department stores were when online learning came into place. So he's suggesting a lot of tier 3, tier 4 educational institutions will disappear because they just can't survive or adapt. Remote managed IT services. So as I mentioned before, I provide IT for Armprior. I already had my remote hooks into the infrastructure because it's much easier to jump on the computer late at night at home and fix something than it is to drive the whole 4.5 minutes from Braeside to Armprior. Yeah, you're right. I had remote stuff because I'm lazy. Even now, I'm remoting into a campus that I can't physically go to because of the virus, reading my emails, uploading files into the server, right? And that's not even using advanced suites of remote management. So that's definitely going to be an option. Telehealth. So Canadian doctors can now see a patient remotely and bill for it. And what I read yesterday was they're not getting paid quite yet, but apparently in a couple of weeks, they will be getting paid. So this telehealth dream is now becoming a reality. So maybe you're going to build systems that help support telehealth. And then social distancing technologies. So been watching the news, right? Especially with the US opening up and all these people misbehaving on the beach and stuff like that. And I thought to myself, there must be some technology that, you get within 6 feet of somebody and whip, 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 whip. So I checked. So there's one, there's many of them, this UBSense. They repurposed their technology they already had for tracking assets, right? Like where the heck did that, forklift go? And they started slapping it on people, right? So now you're basically, and then their technology will tell you where it's been. Has X been 6 feet from Y? How long were X and Y together? Oh, are there special rules that said X and Y are allowed to be together? So there's all kinds of social distancing technology. We've all heard how various companies have been using our smartphones to track us. So some clever guy who can write an app for a smartphone can probably wheel out a social distancing application for Willis College, for example, to make sure everybody stays social distanced. Okay, and then the last chunk of my presentation, lessons learned for Willis College. As I said before, we found ourselves having to adapt fairly quickly with a small window of time and got things into place. As I mentioned before, we did have to scramble, but we already did have some of our curricula, especially the technical parts that Ranjit mentioned, right? So our software development program and parts of our cybersecurity analyst were already existing in a Moodle-based learning management system. Upper management actually already had me working on a project to build a new system. So I guess that was prescient. So we had to start. I would say we had maybe 5% actually in. So we had 95% to get in there still. Luckily, besides Ranjit being one of our strengths has been Willis College's agility. So we've always been able to adapt to the marketplace, right? Establish new relationships. New technology comes along. Sophos creates this, Fortinet creates that. Cloud technology comes, let's fold this in. So we've always been adapting. COVID-19 gave us the biggest market need that we'd ever seen. The market need was everybody needed to stay home. Well, that's a different one. And everybody still needed to be trained. And they needed to continue where we'd left off in-class training. So we had some people that had just started and the rest of the course had to be online. Other people halfway through, other people finishing off, right? So we adapted. And as always at Willis, right, our people are our strength. I mentioned before, all the way from upper management, having the vision to organize this and guide it, right? Admin people, our techie people, can't say enough about our students. They really took it like champs. A lot of our students, I'm speculating, were really concerned that this was the end of their education. And when they found out that, oh no, when you guys come back from March break, you'll be good to go. We got something, right? Even though it was new, right? They were relieved that their investment that they made was still going to continue. So as I mentioned, the good news was the lockdown started over the March break. So we had 1 week to get things in place. The bad news was the lockdown started over the March break. There goes your March break. No March break, so. Okay. And so the next two sections, one I call Just Do It, and the final one is the fruits of our labor. And it's going to summarize sort of what happened, right, and what we did. Okay. I couldn't resist Shia LaBeouf, Just Do It there. So the first thing was we really didn't have a choice, right? It was do or die. Our paradigm had to shift. A well-known motivational trainer, right, has said before, there's two things that will drive people: inspiration and desperation, right? So we had no choice. If we wanted to continue, we had to do something. So just do it. There was no time to hesitate, right? We couldn't spend our 1 week planning what we were going to do. We had to start, right, and feed into it, right? The longest journey begins with the first step. So yeah, plan as best you can, but just start chopping wood, and eventually, right, when you keep chopping wood, you will have a pile of wood there, right? Don't forget to stop to sharpen the axe though. Do an inventory of your assets. So it's okay, what do we got to do? We got to build a learning system, right? Oh, we got to get content in there. Okay, who knows how to build these servers? Oh, he does. Any of our instructors, have you guys done Moodle before? Oh, you did. Why didn't you say something? So do an inventory of all your assets to find out what people, right, and what talents they had. Okay. Make a plan, right? And then you got to manage and execute it effectively, efficiently, and efficaciously, right? And I do have to say that the plan that was made was ran to a T, right? I was surprised as everybody else that when day one happened, that actually happened, right? It was doing a lot in part to our instructors embracing it, right? The techie geeks, right? And our management and admin staff making it happen. For something as grand as making this giant change in a week, right? It is key to monitor your progress and what you're doing, right? Measure where you are and feed the results back into the process to refine it, right? If you're not watching where you're driving, right, you're going to end up in a ditch somewhere. And also refine the process. You have to be willing to change your plan in a heartbeat and turn on a dime. So maybe this isn't working. Let's try this instead. Everybody, all hands on deck. So everybody needs to be empowered. Don't micromanage the system. Make contingency plans. What happens if we get to Thursday and this isn't working? Divide and conquer. So break it into manageable tasks. Give it to people who can get the job done. Have it well coordinated. There are some of us, I'm probably one of the worst ones, that likes to do it all. So it's good to have racehorses that can run, but you don't want them running free. So you got to basically make sure everybody knows what their tasks are. Watch the clock, right? So where are we? What do we have to do? How do we have to adjust? Encourage the team, right? Make sure everybody knows they're doing a good job. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. And again, having technical support in place for students and staff, that was crucial. We took all the IT guys, whether we liked it or not. We made a help desk. We all got the same emails, and everybody from our most senior IT guy or instructor rather to our most junior instructor were fielding calls and questions. Zoom meetings from us IT people to some of our instructors that were a little less technically savvy to get things in place for them, right? People that knew how to do Moodle and content, helping others, backfilling. So with all this support structure in place, right, for staff and students, that was key to our successful launch.
Awesome.
Yeah, and these were the fruits of our labor. So we actually do have a Willis College class online with courses online, everything from our technical programs right down to our PSW and addiction counseling and business programs and et cetera, all these things in place. And that's the entirety of my presentation. Thank you.